But when we're talking about best policy for whom?
That's a very good point. When I say I have a normative position, it goes roughly like this. Prostitution is of all times in all places. Mm-hmm. So if our 22 country comparison shows anything, then in those 22 countries, which have completely different political regimes, from monarchies to communist rule to Western liberal democracies, over a period of 150 years, where the regimes changed, quite drastically, prostitution was always there. Mm-hmm. There's not a single of those 22 countries where there was no prostitution. To then say, well, we should eradicate prostitution from society, I think you take a big burden upon yourself, because first of all you have to explain why it has always been there, right? And what makes you think you can do something about it. I'm not saying it's impossible. Slavery has been around for a long time and we eradicated that at some point. The debate at the moment is very much waged in strongly normative terms. So there is a patriarchy around, women are violently subordinated, particularly in a sexual way. There is an inversion of values going on. Consent is really means coercion, according to the abolitionists. Sex really means rape in many cases. So this is the language that people use, that in Amsterdam, in the red light district, women are raped sometimes 40 times a day. You can read that in the newspaper. To be honest, in many parts of the world, that is not quite wrong. We should not close our eyes to that. But there is something about the way the debate is now being held that sort of suggests that there is no real argument against this position. I also think that abolitionists hold an unwarrantedly homogeneous worldview when it comes to the relations between men and women. And if you just look around you, at least in the mature democracies of the West, many women hold very autonomous positions when it comes to their expression of their sexuality and their sexual needs, and many men respect those needs.
So when we are reframing women in this context, do you believe it is possible for them to be active agents while working in the sex industry?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if it is one thing I learned, and I emphasize the learning here because it took me a while to understand that as a white male, somewhat older male, is that in fact many of the sex workers, including the migrants, because that's a whole different story you could say, are strong autonomous women, who very clearly say that they are not subjugated by anybody, right? And so who am I to challenge that position? We asked, of course, very explicitly. All that information is barely in the book because the publisher told us to take it out, so I can tell you now. We asked them very explicitly if they were coerced in any way. And of our sample, 10% said yes. At any one point in their careers, they were coerced. That 10% doesn't mean much because it was a qualitative sample. You cannot generalize to the population. That's the way you draw qualitative samples. And all of those 10%, with one exception, were able to extract themselves from that situation by themselves or with the help of friends or clients. Or the police. They just went to the police. The exploitation was always men. Sometimes it was relatives, a cousin, or somebody. In one case, somebody's father, who took money that they shouldn't have taken. In Austria, it's although you can't. There's few opportunities for a migrant to get a regular job. You can start your own business. So many of the women started their own small studio where they were working with 2 or 3 other women and became quite independent and autonomous as a small entrepreneur. The local women, but in the Netherlands, often their story was not one of lack of opportunity. Their story often was one of curiosity, very interestingly. So they enjoyed sex and then discovered you can also get paid for it. And so that is, I must say personally, I found that difficult to stomach in the beginning when I started doing the research, but then I spoke, like I said, spoken to so many in the meantime, so some of the sex workers who are involved with PROUD, which is the Dutch sex worker advocacy organization, that I began to accept that this can be a choice.